All right. David, thank you so much for joining me for this interview. We've done this before last year, which was our first NFT.NYC, and I imagine we'll have more conversations together. And I just wanted to have you jump on just to chat about what we're doing February 20th. In Manhattan, we have our upcoming event, which is the leading non-fungible token event happening in Manhattan on Thursday, February 20th. We're excited to have you involved again. As you were last year, we're excited and thankful for you and your team's contribution to the crypto collectible and digital asset market. And I think you have some insights on where we're at and kind of where we're going as an industry. So for those that may not know who you are, could you please introduce yourself and what your firm does?
Sure, thank you, Ian. So I'm David Pakman. I'm a partner at Venrock. We're early stage investors, and we invest in a lot of different tech companies in a bunch of different sectors. We do focus among all the sectors that we look at. Crypto is one of them. And we've made a number of investments around crypto. The one that's pretty relevant for this conference is our investment in Dapper Labs, which most people know as the creators of Crypto Kitties, who are hard at work at a bunch of different technologies and applications in the non-fungible token space.
And so with Dapper and Crypto Kitties, there's an unexpected wind in the sails, right? I don't think anybody could have imagined Crypto Kitties would be as explosive as it was as it rolled out in 2018, and people became very excited about this new form of collecting things and creating things. And so maybe you could talk a bit about maybe the state of the NFT industry now, and maybe where you see things heading soon as we kind of get into doing the event together next month, and where you see things maturing over time.
Sure. Well, I think we're still in the potential energy phase of a lot of mainstream consumer blockchain-based applications. You know, we've got maybe about 50 million addresses who transact in Bitcoin, in a global population of 7 and some billion people. And so crypto in general is still nowhere near mainstream. And a bunch of us have posited that if you can sort of take the blockchain-ness and the crypto-ness out of the space and try to produce consumer applications that have a lot of consumer benefit, you might be able to spur more mainstream use of blockchain-like technologies. So one category for that most of us at NFT.NYC are supportive of is the idea of crypto collectibles and digital assets. And I think we're all comfortable with the fact that things like the ERC 721 token standard and things like that allow proof of ownership and composability and a bunch of really cool features that let consumers feel comfortable that they can own digital items, whether it's art or some collectible, have a really clear provenance of that, and have it sort of live by a set of rules. And as I've talked about last year, and talk a little bit about again this year, collecting is something that a lot of people do or have done at some point in their lives. But it's hard to do digital collecting, and mostly because we can't assure uniqueness of the digital item, but we can using blockchains. And so I think most of us are still really excited that could be, digital collecting could be a real tipping point for blockchain becoming mainstream. The problem is, I said exactly the same thing last year, and we really don't have any meaningful evidence in the last 12 months that we've made much progress visibly. That is, I can't really point to any newly released digital collectibles that achieved any, let's call it, notable usage or adoption. There have been some really cool experiments, but they remain pretty small in their usage. So, that really begs the question of where are we and why is that the case? I think that's a good topic for us to focus on.
Yeah, no doubt. I hope that me and my company will make an impact, and next year you'll be talking about what we've done.
I hope so too.
I have been a collector my whole life. Started off with coins and stamps, and I remember being a young kid, and I would take my money and go buy rolls of pennies and rolls of nickels and rolls of dimes and fill up books. And I'd ask all my neighbors for their mail, and I'd pull off the stamps and all my, uncles and aunts and grandpas' stamps and patch things together. And that was one side of collecting, where those things usually retained value or grew in value, and other people in the world cared about things like coins and stamps or baseball cards and things like that. And then I also collected things like movie tickets or things that were unique, one-off, non-fungible things that nobody else had value for. Like nobody cares about, me seeing the Star Wars movie the night of or something like that. Only I cared about that. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing to me about the crypto collectible market is it does bring together those two psychological reasons for collecting. It brings together the psychological reason of like, this is a one-off, non-fungible thing that's personal to me, like a movie ticket for something that was important, or a concert ticket. There's only one seat, for that concert ticket like that, much like people are finding in the crypto collectible space. But also, other people value these crypto collectibles like they would have stamps or coins or sports cards. So it is interesting when I think through that both those psychological draws for collecting are in place with the digital asset NFT type market. If there's an industry that you feel is most promising, is there one? I mean, I know there's several industries that are creating NFTs. Obviously, esports, the whole video game industry, as well as art, as well as just general sports. There's a lot of people kind of pressing into this. Is there an industry that you are feeling more optimistic about than others?
Well, I think just touching on a few things you said, there are a bunch of different reasons why people collect. I found an academic paper by a notable psychologist that identified 7 different reasons for collecting that go to some very kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs base psychological human needs. So I agree with your point of view that we do collect as a species, and we do it for a bunch of reasons, and that hasn't changed in a very long time. The categories, so the next question you're asking is, so like, what are some categories that are sort of prime for early usage of digital collecting? And I think there's a few. I think sports is very interesting because sports is, depending on the sport, a very global medium of entertainment, and therefore you can have a very large market, both from an appeal perspective and from a trading perspective, very early on, as opposed to picking something very, very niche. So one of the projects that I think is worth talking about is what Dapper Labs announced in the last year, and that's this partnership with the NBA, where they're going to release in 2020 a collector game in partnership with the NBA, which are like, key moments in a game, a dunk or a deke or some three-pointer by your favorite player. And there will be some uniqueness to those moments. That is, there will only be a certain number of them. And they can be useful not just from a collecting standpoint, and maybe they'll increase in value because of their scarcity, but they also are useful in a game. And they haven't talked too much about the game, but you could imagine, the game, it has to do with fantasy type stuff. So I think that becomes there are multiple reasons why you may want to collect your favorite NBA moments. They're not just current; they could be past moments. Great moments in basketball. I think that's pretty interesting. And also, basketball is absolutely a global sport. There's something like 890 million active NBA fans around the world. That's a pretty big audience. So I think that's ripe for as one of the first categories where we can see some consumer adoption. One interesting point I'd make, though, is that Dapper has done a bunch of user testing with concepts of the game and language around it. And when you start talking about things like blockchain or digital collecting or sort of kind of geeky technical descriptions of what these products are, God forbid you say something like a non-fungible token or even a crypto collectible, you lose just about everybody. They just don't get it. You take all of that language out and you just talk about benefits, like own an NBA moment, and you get real high level of excitement. So that, it's not surprising when you hear that, but it is an important reminder for those of us building products in the space that you really want to focus on mainstream consumer concepts and not get caught up in the underlying tech or the nerdy benefits of what the stuff lets you do.
Mm-hmm. Like if you think 10 years out with the NBA, can you imagine some scenario similar to this really playing itself out? In 10 years, somebody's playing an NBA video game on their Oculus or their augmented reality glasses or their augmented reality, whatever it is that they're doing to engage with this game. And in real time, they're playing a game that's maybe along the same lines as an NBA game that's going on. And when they play, every single move they make or point they gain becomes its own asset. It's a one-off asset. Or every time Steph Curry or LeBron or whoever the new Steph and LeBron are in 10 years, they make a great play, that all of a sudden becomes an asset that can then be replayed inside the video game, where you kind of have this mixture through the NFT abilities, where you have people playing esports in a sense kind of tied to what's happening in the real world in the game. Can you see those types of things playing out, and can you see them playing out with hardware products like Facebook's Oculus and with big brands like the NBA? Can you see that type of scenario developing over the course of the next decade?
Yeah, for sure. I have no idea if it will, but what you described sounds certainly plausible to me. I think collecting digital assets that are used in games or entertainment experiences and doing things with them, both inside the game and outside of it, is inevitable. There's a number of reasons why I think IP owners want to do that, but that's going to happen for sure. Whether a lot of that happens in VR or AR or, more traditional mobile or desktop experiences, I don't know what the division of that'll be, but it certainly seems plausible. I think IP owners are looking to keep their users or consumers engaged as much as possible. And, gaming went from being, in the last 10 years, gaming went from being a single player or small multiplayer experience to being an unbelievably large multiplayer, multi-participant experience.
That's right.
Right,
That's
both
right.
with MMOGs, but also with Twitch and live streaming. So now you have gaming really becoming very large social interaction activities. And because of that, I think that increases desire for other people to somehow participate. So you could see scenarios where, here's an interesting example. Today, the way that you participate in watching, Myth or someone play Fortnite is by watching the live stream and maybe like commenting or tipping in the chat room, right? Or you might be super lucky and one day you're playing Fortnite and you kind of run into Ninja in a game. But if you could take parts of a great player's experience and turn them into tokens that are bought, sold, traded, and collected downstream, and the IP owner is collecting some revenue on that every time those trades and uses happen, everybody wins, and you increase participation without you having to be as good a Fortnite player, as Ninja. So I think it's somewhat inevitable, and I think it's sort of a future I'm definitely excited about.
There was a couple of folks at NFT.NYC last year when I said to them, "So why are you here?" And they go, "Oh, I'm just here to try to talk to David Pakman. That guy's the kingmaker. So he doesn't know yet, but I'm a king. I'm a queen." And so there is one of the draws for people coming, regardless of how far along they are with their entrepreneurial idea or their actual developed company. One of the reasons they come is to connect with you and your peers, right? People that can actually support their efforts and not just with your finances, but also with your wisdom and the things that you learned. So maybe on that note, could you share what type of deals you're currently vetting, what type of deal flow you and your team at Venrock are looking for, since that's one of the reasons people are coming to network with you and folks like yourself?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, to anyone out there who is coming to NFT to meet me, I'd love to meet them. That's why I go there, is to meet, promising entrepreneurs and people doing interesting stuff. So I'm glad we're all looking for each other. I think it's specific to the NFT space. I think what we're looking for are folks that can bridge the gap between concept and traction. One reason why I think it's taking a long time for the stuff to come to fruition is we're still building infrastructure. There are very few scalable layer one smart contract platforms that could handle a mass market consumer product. There are a lot of folks working on wallets, but we need really easy fiat to crypto on ramps. There's a bunch of different components that people have been working on the last year or two that hopefully are getting to the point of true usefulness. But what we're looking for are folks who are past the concept stage and have something that's starting to look interesting, something that's got a little bit of traction or can demonstrate some consumer usefulness, or their insight is translating into usage.
Right. And does that look similar with the companies that you invest in? Do they have similar size developments already done in place, similar number of users already engaged, or similar amount of revenue, or at least a plan toward revenue? Or are the companies that you're looking at kind of all over the place, and there's usually one really strong bright spot that is the attractor that says, okay, this is worth the risk of getting behind this entrepreneur or this team or this company?
We're typically Series A stage investors, which in the traditional consumer world means that the product is live and there's a little bit of commercial traction to discuss. In blockchain world, very few projects are live. So we've made some investments in things that are yet to come. But for instance, we have invested in sort of blockchain or infrastructure as well. So we're investors in 3Box, which is a decentralized data and identity network that if you're an app developer and you are, I should say, a DApp developer, and you have to figure out where you're going to store your user data, can't store it centralized because that's not what a DApp does. You need a decentralized network, so they provide that network. That's a piece of key developer infrastructure. But when we invested, they were already live. They had a node package that had been downloaded tens of thousands of times by developers. So we are looking usually for some evidence of product market fit.
Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of going to events like NFT.NYC, where you get to network with folks, what's the best way for somebody to connect with you? Because you welcome it, right? You want people that are in that right phase to connect with you, meet with you there. Is it best for them to reach out to you or to Venrock beforehand, schedule a meeting with you? What's the best way for them to cater to you, since they're the ones that want to talk with you about what they're doing?
Yeah, well, I think as an entrepreneur, when I was looking to meet funding sources and venture partners and folks like that, I found that sort of approaching them at a conference and trying to, which is noisy and loud and lots of distraction, to try to have a real deep and meaningful conversation where you can explain what you're working on is pretty challenging. But it still is useful to connect with people in person. So I would recommend trying to reach out by email beforehand and say, hey, I'm going to be in town in 2 weeks at the event that you're going to be at. Here's a little information about what I'm working on. Here's a deck, or here's my background. Is this consistent with an area of your investment interest? Seems like it is, and I'd love to meet you for a few minutes. Or that could turn into a longer meeting also if it's right in our power alley of investment focus. So that's what I'd recommend. But I'm pretty open-minded. I'm happy to meet people. It's just unlikely that you'll get a sit down at a loud conference and then a focused 30-minute presentation or hour presentation.
That's right. If they want to reach out to you or Venrock, would they go through Venrock's website? Would they reach out to
Oh, yeah, I'm DP at Venrock.
Twitter or
just send me an email. Yep.
Great. So DP at Venrock. That's the move, everybody. If you are listening to this interview, there may be some folks that listen to our raw live interview on YouTube, which is just our chance to capture it. But of course, we're going to post-produce this conversation and make it accessible for folks in a much easier way. So, well, David, again, thanks for taking time to jump on with me. I always enjoy our conversations together. Any last thoughts as we wrap up our interview?
I'm excited for the conference. I think it's great that there's an event just focused on this category of possible traction and usage. And I'm excited to meet people. And thanks for having me on the podcast again, Ian.
Absolutely.